Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I am Bart, and joining me on this episode to talk about a lot of U.S. soccer news is a man who was very fond of Matt Turner's fashion choices this week. It's Thomas, aka U.S. Keeper. You liked that main flag hoodie he was wearing, huh?
I did. I picked right up on that. It's a big topic of conversation in my neck of the woods.
Are y'all the state crest on a field of blue flag?
Yeah, exactly. So
those should be outlawed. Take back whatever Matt Turner was.
I mean, the crest is great. I mean, but I could see why people like the new one. It is classic. It is original from 1901, I believe. Yeah. So I picked it up on Turner wearing that. I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know how he got it or if he even realized where it's from, but
that is cool.
I was pretty cool to see that. So
yeah. He probably thought it had something to do with New England as a whole, and so obviously the kid from New England area.
Because the Revs flag is like a New England flag too, right? So there's a lot of history behind those.
It's really cool though, because anytime we get a U.S. camp going on, you get all this fashion takes. I mean, Sergino Dest coming out with a full-on tracksuit from Casablanca clothing company. I mean, those are just fun. It's obviously just fun to see guys coming into camp, especially the Nations League roster full of European talents and domestic favorites. Before we get into the Nations League, though, we got to talk about the fact that the U20 teams disappointed us both the same day. U.S. women losing 2-1 to Mexico in the Concacaf Women's Championship final. I personally think that they outplayed Mexico. Mexico just seemed to have two spots where they got two chances. They scored. Unfortunate, but it meant a lot of to Mexico. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that game?
There was a little more firepower. I said earlier. I thought Mexico was playing very well. At that level. Yeah. I think they're finally maybe getting it. On the women's side. I mean, which is you want that a little bit. Like
we need it. CONCACAF needs that.
Right. I mean, you kind of need that. Canada's there a little bit. Got Mexico and United States. I think that's. I mean, it's unfortunate they lost, but I mean they're in, and that's what matters for them. So they didn't bring that piece home, but I thought Mexico had shown well in the tournament. So it's not. Yeah. It was a well fought match, but in the end they just came up a little bit short.
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, the U.S. women did qualify for the U20 World Cup next year. So ultimately, that's what matters, right? You go to that World Cup in the next. I forget where it is next year, but next year. U20 men losing to Uruguay 2-0 in the quarterfinals. Another quarterfinal exit. And again, I feel like losing to the eventual champion. I think that's happened a couple times in this 5-year or 5 tournament run of losing in the quarters. Look, clearly Uruguay is a good team. I think that was my takeaway from that game is Uruguay is a team full of guys who are ready to play at the professional level up and down the ranks. And the U.S. still with some raw talent out there.
Yeah, it was, they definitely didn't have the talent that Uruguay had in that match. I mean, they had their opportunities, and I think we mentioned it earlier. Not having a striker, I think, was a little impactful there.
Yeah.
But again, I think ultimately, they just went up against a better team and lost. We've seen in the past where probably matches at that stage in the U20 World Cup where they probably could have won it. Yeah. I didn't really feel that way all that much. Again, I think they could have, maybe cut the score in half, but ultimately Uruguay was the better team in the tournament. So
and that happens. Sometimes you face a team that's actually just better than you, and people try to kind of I feel this way a little bit with the U.S. Netherlands from the Men's World Cup in November. Actually, it was December at that time, where we're all trying to rationalize how we lost and all this stuff. It's we had our opportunities, but Netherlands is a really darn good soccer team. And probably better than us.
Right. And I think that's the difference when you start getting to the elite level, right? So it's there's matches that you could draw as you're this is a winnable match, right? And I actually thought it was for them going into it because
I thought it was too. Sure, yeah.
Right. Based on how they had played, based on how Uruguay had played, based on the fact that they had a lot more rest. There's a number of factors that came into play there, but none of that mattered, right? I mean, Uruguay just played better, and I think when we look at that, you can't miss those opportunities. You can't. Right. You can't miss them. And that's the difference between getting to that next level of, a senior World Cup or any of these other World Cups. You've got to make the best of those opportunities, and they're not consistent there. And I think that's where I get frustrated as a fan, is that consistency at that stage. Like, we're seeing it consistently get to that level, but you got to get over the hump, right? You at some point you have to get to that next level and meet that. And I think fans want it. I mean, I was so locked into this tournament, and excited to watch it, but I think I'm curious to see how it grows with Matt Crocker.
Sure. Yeah.
Now it's in his hands, right? Like, he didn't have a lot of influence on this, I don't think, but now it's in his hands. So over the next, 2 or 3 U20, U17 World Cups, it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves.
Well, you can't have tournament losses without asking the question, should the coaches be fired? And I personally would like to see Tracy Kevins never be involved with the U.S. program ever again. She's just completely she has consistently delivered disappointing performances with the U20 and U17 women. But I thought Mikey Virus has done a great job with this group at this level. And again, I don't think that the U20 coach, and I feel this same way about Tab, their job isn't necessarily to win games. And that's really complicated for people to understand who, as fans, we want to win. But the goal of this group at the U20 level is to get them integrated into the U.S. senior system and hopefully develop them into U.S. national senior team players. I think Mikey did a really good job. I don't necessarily think that any of these players are ready for that next step, but that's not on Mikey. I thought he still got the best out of a lot of players from this group.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he did a good job. I mean, they didn't have every player, from a quality perspective that was available to the U.S. And I think when you look at the tournament, and I said it, last time, what's going to come out of this? And so where these players end up going forward. And so in a year, I see the thing is, in a year, I'd like to see these players at a higher level. And then at that point, I think what you see is possibly them maybe sneaking into the national team a little bit.
Right, totally.
Because after Copa Americas, as long as they qualify, after Copa Americas, then you have a 2-year window there where these U20s have that opportunity to be able to make some, to make some national teams to be able to get in the mix.
Yeah.
If they're capable of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think from this group particularly, it's very true that you didn't have a whole lot of actual starters for their club teams, right? I mean, Gaga's a great player, a great goalkeeper, but he's not starting for Chelsea. He's playing a lot of minutes at the U21 league, but not the guy necessarily. Cade Cowell, Caleb Wiley, they're starters for their MLS teams. But the Philly guys aren't locked in starters for Philly. McGlenn maybe is the one exception there. Vargas and Wolf are good, but they're not that type of level of talent. So I'm with you. Josh Widener's obviously one, but he's at USL level. But I'm with you. The goal is to get individually those guys to take their next step because they got good exposure, good experience in this tournament. So Widener going to Benfica, fantastic. Love that. Can you work your way up to the first team? I don't know. He'll probably not be first team really, kind of with Jonathan Gomez. Well, maybe a B team player, but that's fine. How do you take those next steps and progress? So I'm with you. It's on Mikey to make sure that they're all rowing in the same direction, integrated into the U.S. system, but now they have to take their own individual steps. And I think a lot of these guys can. All right. So those two tournaments were a little disappointing, but now we're going to the tournament that the U.S. is the reigning champ, the Concacaf Nations League, by far the most important, tournament in CONCACAF history, correct? I mean, we all have dreamed of winning Nations League since 2020.
Yeah, it's funny, but actually, it has become the tournament of eight players, right? I mean, they've actually evolved that a little bit, and I'm not sure it's for the better or worse. We'll kind of see as it continues to evolve. But what we're seeing is that it's definitely competing on this. Again, if it was an off year and you didn't have the Gold Cup this year, maybe there's more fire. Maybe you can get your A teams in there a little bit. So it's interesting, and so you have your A teams playing because there is. I think it's just a shorter run, right? It's 2 matches, as opposed to a potential 6-match Gold Cup run. So I mean, they're building it, which is great. I think it's nice to see that. the next edition, has implications for the Copa America qualifying.
I mean, look, I joke about it because it is new. The Nations League concept is also new. But it is a tournament of the top talent in the region. Because, to your point, and this is where it does differ from the Gold Cup and why I think we're seeing two very different rosters, this is 2 matches. So if you're talking about getting best players in from their, club teams in Europe, and I know they're all done with the European season, but it's still, their clubs are taking precedent. It's an easier sell. Come over for 2 games, have some fun, let's go win a trophy, as opposed to the 6-week grind of the Gold Cup. I do think that's why these tournaments are different and why you're seeing the prioritization of Nations League. I think that it's because back in 2021, after the COVID stuff, the Nations League was the first one back. I mean, that had to kind of play a role, and CONCACAF has to like the fact that kind of forced the Nations League to take priority over the Gold Cup.
Yeah, I mean, it really kicked it off, right? Because World Cup qualifiers followed right after, the Nations League and the Gold Cup that year. So it really kicked things off a little bit, and really it kind of set the tone. I mean, really, it got fans back into it at a high level. It got the players back into it. So I think it was, a nice piece of it. And I think it's nice also for this group to have like a 10, 11-day camp, right, before they play matches. I mean, that's something that we don't see during the international breaks, right? This is a little bit longer of a window, a little bit longer of a stretch for these guys to kind of, have the opportunity just to be together.
Yeah, I mean, have the camp cupcake that everyone loves. So this is a great time to camping with the guys. And as we kind of know, when you're in a tournament, the training is so different than a training camp. And so having, like you said, 11 days together allows them to work a little bit more on things that they want to do on the field as opposed to just responding. Now, granted, let's color all of this by just reminding people that we have the assistant to the interim in charge. And it's just very unclear what the players are necessarily learning from a tactics perspective here. But what are your general expectations for this group heading into this tournament?
I mean, the player quality is there. So I like the roster that's been created for this group. So I think that, is a good stepping stone. You're playing Mexico in the first match. So I don't care, who's out there. I mean, it matters, right? Like it's a huge, like playing Mexico no matter what is a big deal. But like in this, we don't normally see Mexico in anything but a final. So it's that in itself is a little bit of a different perspective for even a fan, to kind of be there. It's like, geez, you're not playing in the final against each other. You're playing, be in the final. And I think that's, a level of motivation too. So, and you can all tell that they're aware of that and they're ready to go. So I think they, again, I like the roster. I think they have a good opportunity. And for me, it's all about tactics.
Well, that brings me to the next question though, really is we have BJ Callahan leading this team. Now, I'm not trying to besmirch BJ. He seems like a great guy, but the reality is he's never been the head coach of anything before. Certainly not anything meaningful. He, seems to be like the tactics and video nerd type guy. Like he definitely, from what has been detailed, he was in charge of explaining the game model to new coaches and new players. But knowledge of how you're supposed to play versus applying that onto the field and making adjustments once the game has started is very different. I am personally concerned because I just don't, I don't have any faith in him because I haven't had any reason to believe that there could be faith in him. I'm not trying to be super negative about it, but that's just kind of where I'm at. It's like, I don't trust the guy because I've never been shown any reason to trust him at all. How do you feel about the coaching situation right now? Plus Jason Christ, apparently.
It's a mess, and I think it goes back to an early comment you made about Mike Vargas. I think again the coaching piece of it, you have to have. U.S. has to build a better coaching model, right? You've got to be able to, if you have to be in a situation where you have interim, you better have a solid staff that exists at all your levels, so you can pull in a coach to the national team level, right, and be able to say, hey, this is you. We'll figure out the U20s or U17s or whatever it is, right? And so, and I think you have to have that in place. We haven't had that in a while. It fell apart. We used to, because if you look at the history of the managers that they've had, they at some point were part of the federation, right, at the youth level. And so we don't have that. And so going back to the conversation of confidence in this staff, I don't have that, but it's because they haven't proven it. I mean, Jason Christ, we've seen him what he can't do.
We've seen him fail,
right? And so my concern is this. And so I've been tough on Greg, but one of the things Greg did do well within CONCACAF was adjustments, right? He made in match halftime adjustments to we saw it, in the qualifying. We saw it in the Nations League the last time around against Mexico. We saw him make those strategic, tactical moves in the second half to position and give the U.S. the opportunity to win those matches. And I think that's where I get concerned, right? If it comes down to that, how those decisions made. Don't get me wrong, Greg wasn't perfect. I sat there a lot of times saying, well, why are you subbing, Roldan in for an attacking whatever? Like, he made bad choices too, but in kind of the critical moments, for as he kind of evolved into the system, he did that. And so, hopefully we're not sitting there, at the 70th minute, needing that sort of change to flip it around. Hopefully, they can, have a dominant performance and we can not have to worry about that specific piece of it. I mean, it's Mexico. The game's going to be cold, right? So
and I mean, I think to your other point as well, the squad, the team we have is very talented. I will say that I think Mexico's team has kind of elevated itself since the World Cup, but it's still a very depleted and untested even Mexico team because they're kind of moving on from some guys, bringing in new guys. I mean, Chucky's not here, no Hector Herrera. I mean, you have Memo Ochoa, but like you're bringing in maybe not good defenders, but you're filtering out maybe not good defenders, but you're still bringing in new guys who haven't had a whole lot of experience. So the U.S. comes into this as the much more experienced and quite honestly talented squad, which is a weird feeling against Mexico.
Yeah, it's not normally a spot we've been in, but I don't want to take Mexico for granted because when you do that, then it's a rude awakening, right? There's always, I mean, there's always those possibilities, but again, they're in transition too. You've got a new coach. They've had a few matches under him. So, I'm sure they're adjusting there, but, they're kind of, they're, hitting it, at a new timing. So maybe you catch it right and, you can expose them for that and take care of business, on a big way. But I always expect it to be a close match, a hard fought match. So.
I mean, I think the intensity will be there. We even saw that a little bit in the Continental Classico where it was still a U.S.-Mexico level intensity, even though the players weren't that great. Speaking of players, though, we're missing a big one, right? We're missing Tyler Adams. He is not here. He's injured. The biggest kind of hole we've had in the roster for a long time is we don't really have a Tyler Adams backup. I mean, how badly do you think we're going to miss Tyler? Do you think we can cover for that? I mean, what's that? We talked about it on the roster show, but now we have to actually think about this in practice. And like, Tyler's not going to be there. That's a little concerning. That's scary. How do we fix that?
Yeah, I don't. It's a tough loss for sure. I mean, Tyler, he does a lot. He's all over the field. He produces a lot in ways sometimes that don't go noticed. I mean, they have players that can partner, and we talk about the double pivot a lot, and so there are players. Is it a Musa, Luka de Toller? Is it Musa McKinney? Type of thing. To where does Johnny come into it? Like you have. I mean, you've got players here that can fill some of that. Some of that gap, but I think you have to play differently. I don't think you play the same tactics that you would if Adams was there. So I think you've got to play a little bit differently with whoever's going to be back playing, playing in that spot there. So and again, this is where that opportunity. This is where you have to look at this and say, look, I'm going to take a risk, right? Someone's going to be somewhat playing out of position here in this opportunity versus Mexico, and they're a good squad. So we're going to see what. Yeah. And then that's where we have to make adjustments in match, right? Okay, this isn't working, so we have to, sub someone out, or again, just make the tactical changes on there. But that's where it helps this squad collectively become deeper, become stronger, is to find out where that's going to be. Unfortunately, it's under an interim situation. So
well, and that's my concern, because I think you and I we've chatted about this a little bit in private and before the show, but BJ. I think the reason why Anthony Hudson was effective as the head coach of this team during his interim spell was because he kept the basic principles of what Berhalter had instilled, but he understood that principles and tactics are not the same thing. Berhalter was very rigid in his tactics, and I know people like to debate that. He did evolve, but the way that he set up the team and the way that we played was very, very similar from game to game. There were some times where a player might flare out one way or another, but he was married to the 4-3-3 with a deep lying defensive midfielder and two advanced midfielders. My concern is that BJ will fall into that trap of being like Berhalter, where under Hudson, where we saw a double pivot because Adams wasn't available. That was a very simple solution for him. So I'm just concerned that BJ won't find that simple solution because he believes too heavily in the system and the way that they play.
Yeah, I mean, we have no track record, so it's a valid concern. But I would hope he would have learned about some of the, the tactics that we saw from Hudson, and maybe say, geez, maybe there is another way to do it, with this team. And again, he had he's going to have 10 days with this group, and so I don't know how much you can see or evaluate within that time. I mean, again, it's not like he's seeing it for the first time. So, and again, maybe he had his own ideas. You know what I mean? Just because he was there doesn't mean he necessarily falls into Greg's line of thinking. It's we have no track record to know that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they come out. The first 15, 20 minutes is going to be kind of telling to see how they play.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see when that lineup comes out what the tactics will be, if it'll be a double pivot or still that single, the holding midfielder. I really do think that double pivot makes a lot of sense because I think both McKennie and Musa can do that job very well, especially against a Mexico team that is also still trying to figure themselves out. It might be a nice little tactical wrinkle. I know they saw that a little bit in the Continental Classico, but we still had Kellen Acosta there as a defensive midfielder. We still have some other guys. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how that plays out. My hope is the double pivot because I think it makes the most sense. But I don't know also because, again, Mexico is very new. We're still learning about them. But the one thing that we do know, Folarin Balogun, Flo, or Ballo, whatever nickname they're giving him right now, he's going to be there. We don't know if he'll start. It wouldn't be surprising to me if Ricardo Pepi is the starting striker for that Mexico game, but I fully expect that we see Balogun in both matches at some point. That's big, right? This is a big deal to have a striker like this in your roster, correct?
It's massive. Locally, people that I'm talking to, I mean, they don't know his name very well, but they know that this happened, and they're like, I want to see this guy. They know it's a big deal.
Right.
To me, hear that from people that enjoy soccer locally, but to hear on the national team, that's a big deal. And so, and I am on the fence on whether he will start. I mean, in general, there's some mixed thoughts. Do you start him? Did he not earn his spot? The thing is, the attitude coming from the team is great. Pepe's response earlier that said, hey, we're going to push one another, right? And so
Pepe's coming off a fantastic season too. That's where I'm at. Is you got both guys scoring a lot of goals.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you can't say, well, it's absolutely this or that. They both had very, very successful seasons, and he's right. They are going to push each other, and it's going to, and that's important for this. To not say, well, I'm just locked into this position. You went from not in a very short period of time. We haven't seen a national team level, but not having a real defined striker to now saying, geez, we've got 2 or 3 reasonable options here that we can really go to. The depth is starting to grow in this position now that you have him here, and so it's exciting. It's important. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I mean, whether I would start him and whether he will start, it's going to be very interesting to see what goes on there. I'm probably leaning towards Pepe. In my mind,
I am too, and nothing. Yeah. I just think it makes sense to maybe start him first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you don't I don't think you lose. I mean, again, I don't think you lose Pepe if he doesn't start. I said his attitude's been great about this whole thing. I think it's, but we've seen what he can do, right? I mean, he's with this group, so I think that's the challenge. Not having a friendly, I think a real friendly, not a closed door one. I think you missed that opportunity, right? Just to kind of put things together, to kind of have that game speed, because even that closed door match is not going to be full speed.
Yeah, let's dive into that, because I think you specifically have been beating that drum, and I'm with you. It's like you had a long time. You had a very long camp, and I know some guys didn't get in until later, but you could have put together a friendly on Saturday. Again, you were training in Los Angeles. Both LA teams were on the road, so you could have used their facility. I think this was a missed opportunity from the U.S. Soccer Federation to book a friendly before this Nations League.
Well, I mean, it absolutely is. And part of it is because they're overwhelmed doing everything else that they.
That's valid. Well, that is valid.
You know what I mean? But that's their own fault. The players shouldn't be impacted by that. Yeah. The fans shouldn't be impacted by that. Even the federation. That there's money involved. Trust me, you would have sold out any of those venues with this group having a friendly against whoever. It wouldn't have mattered. You would have sold it out. There's money involved there, and you've got to find ways. You've got to find ways to just kind of pull more people into it. Look, this is a tough cycle, right? You don't qualify, so you better figure out how you're gonna manage it. And these closed door things are not going to happen. It's not the '94 cycle anymore. It's just not. That's not going to cut it. You have to be creative. You're going to have to stretch the limits on this, and so in Mexico always seems to outdo us when it comes to that, right? I think they had at least one. They may have 2 within that window, 2 friendlies in that window. Because they stack it, right? Because
they got one against Cameroon and one against Honduras, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right. But they stack it, right? They get one early in the window, and they get one, enough time to kind of rest everyone up, before the first match. And so they do that pretty consistently. Now, sometimes the timing is 1 or 2 days before the window actually officially opens, but a lot of these players were here and available, right? So I don't know what the FIFA rules are on that sort of, releasing players,
Mexico's able to do it, so why aren't we? That's
right,
my
exactly.
Question. I mean, that's where I'm at.
Right, and so that's frustrating, right? And I mean, because at that point, then you can see stuff at game speed along the way. But
yeah,
I think,
even if you grab one of the teams that's playing in the Gold Cup prelims, I know they're not great quality, but grab, I don't know, you could have grabbed Puerto Rico. I mean, seriously, it's a team that's competitive and playing for something. But there's also, you could have grabbed another Gold Cup bound team Guatemala even. I mean, I just feel like this was an easy way to put a friendly in. And it's not like we didn't put an extra game into the Nations League window in 2021, because we did. We added that Costa Rica match after.
Well, they actually you forget about they had the Switzerland match before,
right? That's right. They had 4. Oh, my Lord.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's what the window is designed to do, right? It's actually designed as it's a double window, really, right, of time.
Yeah.
And so they did that, and they had travel involved in that, significant travel, after they played that. So that's the thing. It's missed opportunities. It's missed, growth. I mean, there are some that reached out to me and said, well, they need more practice. 10 days of practice is a long time.
With an interim head coach, get out of here. The
Right,
assistant to the interim, no. BJ, no. Stop that. That's insane. No, this is not. If you had a new coach in place, I would totally buy that. Like, I would be like, yeah, this is a good extended training camp. Like, this is, a good type preseason almost camp. But no, this is, why do we need those 10 days of training? Stop it. These guys are most of them coming off of their European season. They needed, if anything, they needed a couple days to just like recover and then get in here, but they should be fine in terms of like sharpness. And then the other guys are coming out of their MLS season. They're sharp. They're fine. That's a terrible excuse. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to like bully or inform it, but like, it's just like, that doesn't make sense.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, 10 days, but it's rare for teams to have 10 days without anything, right? That's the other thing. So, yeah, it was a missed opportunity. I hope they can figure it out in the end. I mean, I know sometimes there is challenges scheduling things, but you're right. You could have grabbed the Concacaf team, maybe even a South American team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because usually those are ones that are easier to schedule in general, and just had that opportunity to.
Yep. I mean, they're available. Anyway, let's real quickly just hit on the fact that we're playing for a trophy. If we win it, what does it mean? If we don't win, what does that mean?
Again, the winning's important. We have to continue pressing for wins because you want the attention from everyone, right? You win it, you're going to get a little bit more exposure. If you lose it, the people that are kind of half watching are like, oh, it's the men again. They can't do it, right? So that's the thing. It's a chicken or egg sort of thing. Like you don't get huge praise when you win it, but you're going to probably get more heat if you lose it, right? And I think the culture of this team now is becoming, into their prime. They're becoming veterans. Now that, has to build towards 2026. So all these little steps along the way, right, is that building that winning culture within this group. So you can kind of extend it back to, the B, C level players and say, geez, they're doing it. It's exciting me, like, to create that high level of standard. And so for me, that's what we need to continue seeing. And they've done pretty well with that, right? And so that has to continue. We can't have any blips on this. We can't have any setbacks. We have to continue pushing that narrative forward and winning when we're supposed to win.
I think what you just kind of hit on there, that culture, right? And I think a lot of people, they criticize Greg Berhalter, rightfully so. I am not going to sit here and tell you that he was a perfect manager. I don't necessarily want him to come back as the national team coach, which we will talk about. But clearly the guys under the coaching staff that was here put together a very solid culture, one where they care about each other, they care about success, they care about taking pride in their work. And I think right now the challenge is for the players to carry that on, because the coaching staff is a little weird, you got BJ and they seem to all like him and know him, but he doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. This is about the players continuing that culture, the winning culture, the taking pride in winning, taking pride in your work, and trying to go out there and, put on a show for the fans. That to me seems to be what that culture is about, specifically about fighting for each other and winning. So I'm really looking at, is this a continuation of that? Look, in tournaments, sometimes things don't go your way, right? I think that's something that we always understand. So for me, it is about, how does this team play even without a head coach that's truly imparting the vision of what soccer needs to be on these guys. So I'm really looking at the individuals and the collective of the team in this tournament, not so much like the coaching and everything.
Well, that's a great point you make, though, because if you look at this, if the U.S. wins the Nations League and the U.S. wins the Gold Cup, even if the U.S. makes it to the Gold Cup final and loses, right? You look at this and say, okay, wow, it's a talent, player pool, and these coaches, is it the coaches that got them there or the players that got them there? And I think that articulates really why that quality manager needs to be hired to kind of elevate it to the next level, right? Like, the players can do a lot. And again, if they win it, they win both of them, then it's like, okay, wow, the players can do it at Concacaf, first Concacaf. Okay, but what are they going to be able to do
Right.
at Copa America? What are they going to be able to do at this, Confederations, Cup on steroids here in 2025? Like that sort of thing. Like,
my gosh,
and
I forgot about that.
right. So like, what are they going to do at those tournaments?
Yeah.
With a higher quality manager, leading them, because that's really what's needed. Every ounce of talent, every ounce to get them out of these players, because I think that's going to be the testament to how far this team can go and succeed during this cycle, in one that's the most important, since 1994, really, in terms of exposure, in terms of what that's going to mean for the sport in America, and what it's going to mean for the fans, because I don't know when the next one's going to be here, and it may not be in my lifetime. Hopefully it is, but it's hard to know. But I think that's going to be the testament of what we see, and how they can overcome that transition from having multiple managers in a year, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think big picture too, you are at hopefully the start of an incredibly important 3-4 year run for U.S. soccer as a whole, right? And if you're the U.S. men's team right now, you have the opportunity to set that period with winning, right? You have a Nations League that you could win, a Gold Cup you can win, that can lead into a women's team winning their 5th World Cup, 3rd in a row. And then you have Messi. And then you get into, like you just said, Copa America, which is a massively important tournament that's going to bring so many eyes, not only to your team, but to the country as a whole. And then you get the Super Confederation Cup of Magic, or whatever it's being called. I don't know. And then you get the World Cup. So like this is an opportunity for them to just kind of start this on a good foot. Again, it's a tournament at the end of the day, so I think you can expect to win. You have to look at the performance and hope that the team plays well, because you don't have a manager, which may hold the back. We don't know. Let's shift focus from the Nations League to that second tournament this summer, the Gold Cup. We know, again, that BJ Callahan will be in charge. I think it's very clear that BJ probably had a little bit more autonomy over this roster, but this roster was also probably decided by Hudson and staff as well, in terms of like who was going to which tournaments. But look, I think it's an okay roster. I think it is, for me, indicative of a assistant interim head coach who is going with safe options, because that's who he knows and that's who he's comfortable with. This isn't Dave Sarachan trying out everyone new. This is BJ Callahan going with the guys that he knows played well under the guy that he was working for previously. That's my take on this roster. Let's jump into it. 3 goalkeepers are Sean Johnson from Toronto FC, Gaga Slonina from Chelsea, and Matt Turner from Arsenal. I'm very happy with this goalkeeper crew.
Yeah, no real surprises here. I mean, my only thought was if you were going to switch out a goalkeeper, you would have, maybe brought in Celentano or Drake
Calendar. Yeah, again, yeah. I think that's fair. I don't think those guys are. Look,
it's an experience thing at that point. I think I think that's all it is. But yeah, I don't have any issues with it really.
Defenders: DeJuan Jones from New England, Aaron Long from LAFC, Matt Miazga from Cincinnati, Jalen Neal from LA Galaxy, Brian Reynolds from Roma, Miles Robinson from Atlanta United, John Tolkien from the Red Bulls, and DeAndre Yedlin from Inter Miami. My positive is that you get Jalen Neal and John Tolkien into this camp. I think that's great. I love to see Matt Miazga back. I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to show what he can do. And honestly, I think this is a good tournament for Jalen Neal to maybe get a run out. We are very much, I think it's fair to say, kind of far down the depth chart for center backs when you consider that Tim Ream is recovering from an injury, CCV recovering from an injury. Apparently, Mark McKenzie has a dislocated shoulder. Eric Palmer Brown also. So, like, we're kind of far down the depth chart at center back. So good for Jalen Neal, good for Matt Miazga. Anyone else that you're like, oh, that's an awesome call up at the suspender crew?
Yeah, I mean, I like Reynolds. I like Tolkien. I think those are all good. I'm actually kind of surprised Miles is there, not because he's not talented enough. I just think from back-to-back tournaments, right?
Same. That was shocking. I was not
yeah.
expecting him from an Atlanta United.
Yeah,
perspective.
I didn't even consider him really because I just thought he was going to be playing for the Nations League, and you know that would be it. I mean, Zimmerman wasn't on. To be clear, Zimmerman wasn't on the provisional roster. I don't know if it's binding or not, but he wasn't even on it. So I know he's been kind of working through some couple knocks there, but yeah, I like Miazga too. I agree. I think my only criticisms, if we're going to look at that, are probably questioning whether Long and Yedlin were there. I would have,
I am so done with Aaron Long playing soccer for the U.S. I'm sorry. Like Yedlin, I go, fine, whatever. Like, the only reason I can fathom why Aaron Long is here is because he is still technically on the depth chart, and they didn't want to bring in another new guy. But I would so much rather. I would have rather them bring Shea or Widener from the U20s. Like, who cares? I don't know. I mean, granted, you don't want to have two U20 guys and kneel in that, but
Brooks and Fossey would have been my replacements for Yedlin and Long. Again, I don't know if they're. I think Brooks is healthy. I think Fossey's healthy too, but those are my changes on that. I mean, again, I know you want a balance of experience because I will say the roster is well constructed in terms of a combination of like some younger talent, some veterans, and some kind of newer faces. I mean, it is pretty well balanced in that respect, but I think there's a few older folks that I think you could have, maybe filled in a little bit differently.
Yeah. And again, I think this is just a roster picked by a guy who is picking the players he knows. Moving on to the midfield, Gianluca Busio from Venezia, Georgi Mihailovic from AZ Alkmaar. I'm sorry, it's not AZ Alkmaar. AZ Alkmaar. Aidan Morris from Columbus Crew, who spurned the Canadians, said, nope, we're not going with you, and comes to the U.S. for the Gold Cup. James Sands from New York City, Alan Senora from FC Juarez, a holdover from the Nations League roster, and the ever-present and always disappointing Christian Roldan from Seattle.
Yeah.
Why? There is a whole man named Keaton Parks who's playing his little butt off on a U9 field in New York City. I get it. Keaton Parks deserves a call-up. Christian Roldan deserves nothing more from this U.S. national team. He got to go to a World Cup. Bye. Sorry, I hate to be that harsh. He doesn't play. He never was even close to being a starter for the first team as it is. He's aging. He's never been really productive. He has one frickin' assist in an entire time. Like, I'm tired of Christian Roldan being here. I'm sorry to get worked up about this. I just do not understand why we're wasting this roster spot. Wasting it. Because there are other guys experienced in here.
Well, and that's the thing. I was surprised not to see Acosta on here. I don't know. I know he had been fighting an injury in general, but he's a guy that you would expect to kind of see on this roster, right? In general, he's still in his late 20s and been part of the team for a while. But yeah, Roldan to me has never made sense, right? Like he hasn't produced anything. He's had a few flashes and of moments, and mind you, it's a flash, right? I don't know if Parks. I had heard he might be dealing. He might be.
I don't know what his injury.
I don't know specifically. If I couldn't get that confirmed officially, but again, I mean, there's still other options. That you could have brought in Ledesma.
Alex Mendez from what club is he at in Portugal? One of the he's in Portugal. Right. Like, there's other options.
Yeah, like Johnny. I don't know why. Like I don't know why Johnny didn't get called into.
Johnny. This would have been a great opportunity for Johnny to actually play the defensive mid position.
Exactly, and so and I'm surprised Busio's there. I guess Tessman has a knock, and Tillman's got a knock. So I mean, again, it is dwindling down with some of these players just not being healthy too. That is maybe impacting some of the selections as well. And so that may be just it, right? There's just there wasn't enough. Maybe he was that far down the list. In general, I mean, he can serve a role, but I just don't want to see him anymore. It's time to move on. But I think this tournament is kind of the last of it, right? In my opinion, there's no other sense to move forward when you start talking the second half of the cycle.
Let's talk about that for a second, because the September friendlies, I think you and I have both seen rumors that they'll most likely be in Europe. right? And certainly against better competition, right, in September. So I don't see him getting called up there. The October window is against Germany and Ghana, two very good teams. I don't see him being called up to the senior. Like, I don't see him being a part of the 23-man squad for that set of friendlies. So is the next time he would have even the opportunity, possibly November, but that's a Nations League that we have to win, because if we win that, we're going to the Copa America. Like, I don't see when the next opportunity for him to come in until next January. And stop.
Yeah, if you're gonna do that, that January camp, has to be dealt with differently. We've set up for a long time. Yeah, I don't see it. I think there's too much depth right now for you to sell me or anyone on why he should be on this, any of these rosters at this point. If you're trying to put your best out there, I mean, he's in my opinion, he's on the D or E squad if at best, right?
Yeah.
And again, I guess the only thing you can sell is on the experience side of it. So I think really. I don't know. I don't know. It's a frustrating thing for fans. Hopefully, when the next manager gets in there, it changes it up, right? I think you're going to see different players get pulled in too. I mean, like one or two. It's a kind of expected in general.
I'd rather than put this roster spot on Noel Buck. I know he probably won't play much because of the experience issue, but I'd rather just see that. Like, oh, yeah, here's a promising young midfielder who has some attacking talent and seems to be doing well in the game. We didn't call him up for the U20 World Cup. Maybe I think he kind of came on a little too late in that cycle, but why not? Why not? He is worth the investment over Roldan. I think that's where we're at now. Is like, this is a wasted opportunity. And again, I go back to this is BJ Callahan picking guys he knows, and clearly Christian Roldan was the most favored child of anyone in the world when it came to the U.S. national team coaching staff, because they just kept bringing him along. But this is a wasted opportunity to just look at someone else. And I think that's irresponsible on behalf of BJ Callahan.
Yeah, I don't think Noel was even considered on that. He wasn't on the provisional roster. So
nope, he wasn't. So.
And I know I know he wasn't released for the U20. So. Yeah. And so I guess, again, this is where that transition stuff is where we missed out. And the difference between, again, I said before, the difference between the gap between 2018 and this gap is that we've got tournaments, we've got opportunities to see players.
Yes.
In 2018, it was all friendlies, right? You didn't have anything. There was no, you missed the World Cup, so you didn't get to do that, and so you missed that. While it stinks. It was like, what, 11 matches? We
still got a good look at, like, new players.
Right.
Thanks, Dave Sarakin.
Well, and that's the thing. Dave Sarakin, he brought in the new players. That's where, you saw Adams and, and McKinney and that sort of thing come into play, right? And they had that opportunity. And so you took that chance. And I just think BJ Callahan probably wants to build this opportunity for himself, rightfully so, to maybe position himself to have a job after this, as a manager. I mean, maybe that's his goal, or he's positioning to his, because again, he's definitely being cautious and consistent with some of those selections, right? He wants to have those feel good guys around him like Greg did, right? For whatever reason. So I kind of understand that, but on the other hand, you don't hold up a roster spot just because the guy's a good club, good locker room guy.
Sure. Yeah. And that's where I'm at. It's like, it's time to move on. Let's move on to the forward position, because I can't talk about it anymore. I actually don't have any problems with any of the forwards selected. I think my only like issue, and we'll talk about it, is nominally calling someone a forward. But you have Cade Cowell from San Jose coming back from the U20s, Jesus Ferreira from Dallas, Julian Gressel from Vancouver Whitecaps, Jordan Morris from Seattle, Brandon Vasquez from Cincinnati, and Alex Sendejas from Club America, another one coming over, pulling double duty. Like I said, I'm not really concerned or bothered by anyone here. I do call into question Julian Gressel being called a right back, or a forward, because he's been playing right back for the U.S. I think those, if we're going to use him as a forward, those were wasted minutes to try him there. But other than that, I don't know. I'm interested to see Brandon Vasquez actually play for an extended period of time for the U.S. I hope anyway. But I'm also excited to see if Ferreira can kind of take on the role of being the starter. So both of those guys, I think, have an opportunity to win the starting job, and I'd like to see them when they do win that job.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Ferreira, I'm like everyone, I'm mixed on him, but I think this is going to be an interesting opportunity, for him to battle with Vasquez, because I think for both of them, it's a really kind of a pivotal point, right? I mean,
Yes.
because Ferreira, I think he needs, more competition, so I think he needs to grow himself. He's 22, he's got to do that. For Vasquez, this is it for him, right? Like, this is his opportunity. If he's gonna do it with the U.S., this is it. He's a bridge player. He's in his late 20s. If he's gonna make him any sort of opportunity to be part of this group going forward, this is it, right?
He's also older than like the three guys behind or in front of him in the depth chart.
Right.
If you're gonna put him even at fourth, let's even call it fifth. He's older, and he's not that old, to your point, but he's older than Ferreira. He's older than Sargent. He's older than Pepe, and he's older than Balogun. So yeah, like, now's the time to start making your move, bud.
Yeah, I misspoke. He's 24. I was looking at Morris 20.
But he's still young. He's still older than all the other guys. He's in his
right,
mid-20s,
exactly. But he's in that bridge window, right, where he wasn't really part of last cycle, and this is kind of maybe his only opportunity to be part of a cycle, at a high level. So until he gets to his later 20s. So that's a good battle. The Gressel one, I have no clue. I actually didn't have him as a forward anywhere. I had on one of my rosters, I had him as a midfielder, and the other one I had as a defender. So I don't know. You know more about him than I do.
Well, he started playing as a forward for Atlanta United, and then he played right back like 2 games when we played like a 3-5-2, and I think one other time, and so people just assumed he was a right back, and he's really not. I want that to be clear. He's really not a right back. He is a right-sided player who occasionally plays farther down the field than he does up the field. I don't think he's. Well, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think you have a good mix of wingers here who are both. You have one half that are pretty technical. I would put like Zendejas and Gressel into that. And then you have another half that are athletic, and that's, Cowell and Morris. And I think all 4 of those can help us,
Yeah, I mean, that's the only one I was questioning. I think other than that, it's a pretty good group up there. There's some creativity there. I'm really excited to see what Zendejas can do with this tournament. He's shown so many flashes of spectacularness. I want to see it put it all together in one collective tournament.
I'm curious to compare him to Jordan Morris, because I feel like they're battling for that same spot on the roster going forward as the not the European guy, but still a good winger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's the exact position, right? Like, it's been Morris's and Areola's for a very long time, and now the Zendejas is coming in, and it's his. I think it's his to lose, basically.
Yeah. I will say I think Morris has a slight edge in the fact that he can just play both sides if he wants to. He's probably a little bit more comfortable on the left as he normally plays. But yeah, I think they're both in that kind of mold of, hey, you're the guy who is not the guy, but we still like you and you're close, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think they both start, honestly. I mean,
I can see it. Yeah, you put Morris on the left, Zendejas on the right, and either Vasquez or Ferreira in the middle. That's a pretty decent attack. I mean,
well, exactly.
I actually think that the attacking pieces, the forward line, is our strongest line, and that includes the defenders that have starter Miles Robinson and guys like that. But I think this forward group is really solid.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see what they do. I kind of think they might, move things around a little bit, in terms of some, early on in the tournament to kind of see what's going to work. Because I don't think they will have any opportunity to. It starts the 24th, right? I think.
Yes, so our first one's the 24th.
Yeah, so it's a pretty quick turnaround.
Let's hit that update. There's a news update. We're playing Trinidad and not Nicaragua in the 3rd match of the group because they cheated. Apparently, they used an ineligible player. So they are relegated from the tournament, relegated from the Nations League spot that they had earned, and Trinidad just takes their place. So if you're an Atlanta United fan listening, that means Jay Fortune is going to be part of this Trinidad team, a homegrown talent here. He's getting called up by the Trinidadian team. They are no longer in the prelims. That is now Antigua and Barbuda. And it's Trinidad is our 3rd match. I don't think that changes anything. We should still beat them. It's just an interesting note.
Yeah, but they're definitely better than I think. I mean, typically I think they would be better than Nicaragua. But they're
in a rebuild. Like, I think that they are in a full programmatic rebuild of what does Trinidadian football look like going forward. So I'm interested to see them as well. But little Atlanta note, Jay Fortune will get the call up there, so that's cool. Any other thoughts on this roster right now for the Gold Cup?
No, I mean, I think overall, I think there's no, huge gaping, misses. I think that a lot of it's expected. I think there's a few players, as I mentioned, that I might replace. But overall, I think it's pretty solid. It's going to be interesting because I oddly kind of, in my mind, trying to compare it to 2021 a little bit in terms of, that B-level squad. I think, 5 or 6 players that were on that.
It's a little different because there were more players from that squad that had played with the national team before, I think, in 2021. Looking at, like, Areola, Leggett, I mean, even like Vines, guys like that who had been starting, for us. But I think it's not dissimilar.
Yeah, and I mean, as we know, that squad had, they won 5 of their 6 games, 1-0, right? So,
I think we'll score more this tournament. That's my big prediction. I think now, granted, we'll see what tactics BJ puts out there, but I do think that this attacking core is more productive.
Yeah, can't wait to see what it evolves into. It's, it's just 2 separate things, right? I think you have to look at that from Nations League to this. It's 2 separate, very tournaments with different groups of players that are involved in this and are going to be involved in this cycle, and we have to. This is where that depth gets extended, right? And where we can see who can do what. Because what is Aiden Morris going to do? Can he make it or break it, right?
This is a massive tournament for Aiden. I agree. And unfortunately for him, it would cap tie him because if I were him, I would want to see a little bit more how I fit into the system. But he wants to play for the U.S. Good for him. This is huge opportunity for him because, again, you got to find someone who's the backup to Tyler Adams. So is it him? Let's move on to a slightly more uncomfortable topic. Uncomfortable for some people on Twitter. Let's put it that way, because Christian Pulisic and Tim Weah over the past week and a half have come out with varying degrees of positive comments about Greg Berhalter. Christian Pulisic saying basically that Greg Berhalter should be considered, praised the way that he brought the team along. And Tim Weah went as far to say that he would want Greg Berhalter back. What do you make of those comments, and what do you make of the absolute meltdown that U.S. Soccer Twitter had after those comments?
I mean, when you develop chemistry, when you go through battles together, it's not surprising, right? And so when a coach has your back, you're going to support that, right? The unknown is sometimes scary to players in terms of like what their role is going to be as it changes. And so maybe that's part of it. I mean, I don't think, I don't think I necessarily want to see these players throw Greg under the bus either, right? You know what I mean? There's a balance between that. So I get, if you have to choose one or the other, you're going to be, you're going to choose the positive, right? And so right now they've nothing to lose, in my opinion. Who cares what the fans say? Screw them. Like I don't care about that piece of it, because think about it. Like we're playing an emotional game here. These guys are living it, so they have to kind of, they've got to be a little bit diplomatic in terms of how they're, answering these sorts of questions. And I think that's part of it, right? I think they had a good experience. I think they had a positive experience, but I think they're really looking deep down. They would realize, like, Greg has a ceiling, right? In terms of that, they've played at a very high level, so they know that. So I think they're just trying to be, balance that, because they're not asking every player what they think, right? And I can guarantee you, you ask players that were on the fringe, you ask Pepe what he would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think they always point to the Joe Scally interview about how he kind of made bad comments about Berhalter. Like, he didn't name him, but he did point out things that he would want in a national team coach that I think maybe were veiled criticisms of Berhalter. But to your point, Scally was a kind of a French guy,
Well, right.
So, and there have been plenty of other players who have been positive about Berhalter. I think, to me, the big takeaway is 2 things. One, I think the player group enjoyed working with Greg Berhalter. I think that is apparent. I think that has been apparent for a long time. I think there may have been frustrations with some parts of, playing for the national team, but that is natural. I think just overall they enjoyed playing for Greg. I also think this has some level of like anxiety or angst to just that, like, why are we on our second interim head coach type thing? So they are probably positive about Greg Berhalter because it's a hell of a lot better than the situation they're in right now. And to your point, it's something that they were familiar with. Most of them were, I mean, at the end of the day, the U.S. was a winning team under Berhalter. I don't think we won when it mattered most. And I do think that we had struggles. But overall, the team was a winning team under Berhalter. And it's hard for me to criticize a player for saying that he was a good coach when clearly they performed well.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, look, we have our opinions on Greg, but let's separate let's just separate the reality behind that. They're not going to burn bridges. They're not going to do those sorts of things. There was a positive experience ultimately, and that's it. I mean, because it does no one any good to start doing that stuff, and I think that's part of it too. Like, there's just not. And here's the thing: when you're negative as a team, that kind of breeds into the team.
Yeah.
These guys, if you watch some of the videos that are being released, you watch these guys are loose, they're happy, they're laughing, and so they're focused, about that. If you bring in they dealt with a drama 6 months ago. They don't want to deal with it anymore. So that's part of it too, right?
And it seems like the team is way past that.
Oh, absolutely. That's in their rearview mirror. The fans can't get over it. The media can't get over it. Like let's move on. Like that stuff drives the team, and sometimes there's a motivation that exists for that, but it's over. And so these comments could absolutely be 100% true, but they're not going to disparage that situation. They're not going to turn that up to bring it back because that's all that would do, right? Is it would start that whole thing down again, and we don't need to go. We're moving forward. As they said, only forward.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. Is I think for me, and I said this multiple times on this podcast and others, is that look, I didn't want Greg to continue because I don't believe that you should have a coach for the same coach for 2 cycles in a row. It's just a belief I have. Unless that man won you a World Cup, I don't think he needs to carry over. That doesn't mean that I don't think Greg Berhalter didn't do good things for the program. That's just okay, let's move on and see if we can get something better, And speaking of trying to find something better, you not broke news, but had a news that I didn't see in my timeline earlier today, talking about how it was Matt Crocker getting released early from Sunderland. Explain that.
Yeah, Doug McIntyre had released an article, that kind of got missed in everything.
Yeah.
So releasing an article said, hey, U.S. Soccer has interviewed 10 or more coaches from, England, France, Germany, Spain, Central America, and that sort of thing. And so, I started reading the article, and it says that he was released early from Southampton, and so now he's able to focus on this.
Probably because they got relegated.
Well, right, and so they're probably trying to move on too, right? They're saying, well, okay, we didn't, we got relegated. You're moving on anyway. We're going to, release you early. You're needed for management hire. You're needed for a Women's World Cup, and it's appreciated. But yeah, I think that it's really kind of gone quiet. I mean, in terms of what the report came out, right? In terms of the interviewing piece.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great thing. Sadly, I don't think the timeline changes at all. I think what changes is the focus that goes into that. Maybe they are able to speak to more candidates at a high level for a longer duration, as opposed to trying to rush something along the way. So, there were, I think, 8 names within that article.
There were some. You said it. More than 10 coaches for the vacant USMNT job. That's the report from McIntyre. Included candidates from England, France, Spain, Germany, Central America, and several from the U.S., which is fine. I don't think you and I are, against that. The names listed, and for the one that's going to blow people away, Greg Berhalter was listed in that article, which fine. Steve Cherundolo, who has been praised on this podcast by Caleb many times. Luis Enrique, Thierry Henry, Pellegrino Matarazzo, Pellegrino Matarazzo, Jesse Marsh, Hugo Perez, and Patrick Vieira. So these are names that I don't think are surprising, but I think it's a solid group of names. I do want to talk about a conversation you and I had publicly on Twitter, because I think this needs to be reiterated. Yes, U.S. Soccer has probably more money to spend on a coach. I think you and I agree that they are more willing to spend more money on this hire. But the highest paid coach at last year's World Cup was only making like $7 million. This is not a national teams, and the FAs do not have billions of dollars to lure in coaches. This does limit your coaching search pool. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And I think where it limits it is that I don't know if it's a combination of an ego thing, but obviously a combination of, that respect thing. So, you look at the greatest, managers out there, or the high successful managers, they're making $10-15 million, a season, but the demand on them is a lot higher, right? So if you look at the candidates involved here, I mean, they're A, affordable, or B, have been national team managers, right? So,
Absolutely,
and so I think that's part of it. So there's an expectation of what that is, and so I think that's very clear. I think $5 million is a reasonable high end figure for the candidate, right? You find, if it's Enrique, if he's your person, if he's your guy for the job, you pay him the 5-6 million, right? You find that, you can find. Trust me, they can find it. They trust me. You see how much Messi's getting, and there's a lot of other endorsement stuff built into that. They can find the money if they truly get their A candidate along the way, and that's the thing. And it's not a huge pill to swallow, because you're going to make so much money on this World Cup.
Right. And I mean, I think what has been pointed out too is it's not like U.S. soccer is absent of cash right now. Obviously, things have been hurt from the COVID year, where you weren't able to host friendlies and other competitions. But I think they've made up for that. I mean, the ticket prices for qualifying more than made up for that. I will tell you that. They got plenty of my money. There's money to pay a coach, but I think also, and we've talked about this, is there's a way to sweeten the deal a little bit. Can you get a sponsorship? Can you get, a big donor to step up and give some money? Can you get things like that to push it to 5, maybe more than that? I look at this as looking at it's probably in that $3 to $5 million range, somewhere in there. Obviously, that depends on the coach. For example, Hugo Perez probably on the low end of that because of the salary he currently is on with El Salvador. Same with like Berhalter or Cherundolo, right? I don't think they're demanding they're not demanding $5 million. But Patrick Vieira made $4 million last year at Crystal Palace. I'm sure Matarazzo made a decent chunk of change in Germany. And Luis Enrique, a former coach, but still made a decent amount of money. So, yeah, that high end is for those guys who you go, if you dial in and go, this is the guy, you're going to have to splash some cash. But all these guys kind of fit in that $3 to $5 million range. Maybe you can stretch it.
Yeah, and I mean, to correct you, though, I will say that the last tax season, they did lose $20 million from the beginning of the year to the end. So
all that money I gave them, what they did with it?
Yeah, no, they had there was a lot of lawsuits that kind of came into play too. And
yeah, that's right.
Right. So there were a lot. Let's not forget that piece of it. There were a lot of lawsuits.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, but again, to your point, they still have over almost probably $110 million of assets within the federation. So, and again, they have to know the value here, right? Because you get the right manager in there, one from a winning perspective, but even from a promotions perspective, right? You got to be careful, right? You don't want to go down the Klinsmann road too far. Like, you want a little bit of that because it's exciting, it's new, but you still have to be able to.
We paid Klinsmann a lot of money just because.
We did 3.4, I think, was his peak.
And remember, that is okay. So two things: that is the highest salary that U.S. Soccer has ever paid a coach, right? And secondly, he was also the technical director.
Correct.
So let's again remember that when we're talking about, like, people talking about, we need to go get this coach and this coach and this coach. The most we've ever paid a coach, and he was even our technical director, was 3.4. So it just has, you have to look at it a little bit, understanding that there is a financial constraint that all football associations have at that international level.
And I think there's a balance. I mean, I am very mixed on what I'd want. I mean, I keep going back to Vieira personally. I think he's affordable. I think he's balanced in that sort of thing. I think where he lacks is that international experience. I don't know how.
I mean, the man won a World Cup, so I think I'm okay with.
Well, he as a player, he did, right? But
I think I'm okay with him not having like international management experience. He did,
right? But it's those things, right? Like,
I mean, neither did Greg.
No, I get that, absolutely, and it's that balance, right? Like, where's that balance? And so, like, you kind of want to find that diamond in the rough too, a little bit, right? You want to find that, like, holy cow, like, no one, like, they're there, they've been there, and they got the right opportunity in the right time, and they just made it happen, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean winning the World Cup, but it means going deep and far into that World Cup and being able to do that. So I don't know if that's with a more experienced manager. Again, I always bring back the Bora situation. I'm obsessed with it because I grew up in that time, right? And they really got everything out of that. And so, we're such a more talented country and player pool that we've ever had. So is there a manager that can pull even more out of that, right? Can get even more out of this group, to kind of, not, put us on the map, right? Greg had said, hey, make American soccer, what I don't remember what he said, but he wanted them to be looked at more of a positive light. I don't know if he did that. I don't really think he did. He met expectations. He didn't exceed them, right? And to get that level, you need to exceed those expectations, and be there on that big stage where everyone's watching. And I think, I just don't know who can do that, right? And so that's why I'm hoping Matt Crocker is doing his diligence. It sounds like he's going to have the time to do it. It sounds like, we're hearing names, but we've heard names before. I will say the nice thing about this is that we're not hearing ridiculous names, right? We're hearing available.
We're hearing legitimate names. Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
We're not throwing Zidanes and Jose Mourinho's out there, right? Like, to me, those, like, they'd be shocked if it happened, right? In general, like these names are available or they're affordable, right? So,
well, and the framing of it in the article wasn't just like, oh, they talked to them. It was like they went through a part of the interview process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think I think where my frustration with the last time is that supposedly, and this number seems so crazy to me, but I've had this confirmed on several occasions of 33 candidates that they spoke to.
I'm sorry, that's just bullshit. What does that mean?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry. And you landed on Greg Berhalter?
That's the thing. Right. You can't talk to 33 candidates and then only officially interview 2 of them and say, yeah, that we did that. Now, again, the headline in the article is they interviewed, more than 10 coaches.
Yeah.
Now, if that's the case,
what stage in the interview process is that? But interviewing, I mean, that still counts, in my opinion.
Right. If they truly interviewed, that means it's 5 times more than they interviewed the last time, right? Because that's what that indicates. And so, we'll never get the true report on that. Like, there's no behind the scenes, as I posted earlier, there's no behind the crest, video coming out with this process, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, may get an article, which would be great. I'd love to, get behind the curtain and see a little bit about the process, because it is interesting and they've gone through it enough here in the last, 4 years. So it's,
I will say that I'm with you. Like, I think the frustrating part of last cycle was that there was almost silence, except for we all knew Greg Berhalter was going to get the job. This one at least feels like, with this report especially, and I think it coincides with the fact that Crocker was able to leave Southampton early, right? That, this is being done in a serious manner.
Yeah, I think, I would agree.
I will say that I think if you could pick a manager from that list that we talked about earlier that would just make every single U.S. soccer Twitter person happy, it would be Hugo Perez. I think they would love that. I'm not even going to say I would hate it. Obviously, I think he would be the darling of a lot of those Twitter warriors who think that that Hugo Perez is some sort of savant, but I don't know. I mean, again, I think that there are names on that list that are, like you said, make sense, but are good names.
Yeah, and you have to balance flashy with success too, like, and be able to really structure it in a way that's productive. Because I've been tracking a lot of candidates, and it's easily, well, here's the sad reality. And so there's two lists I have. I have a list of managers that have been hired, that were once available but now not available. So that's almost 24. And then I have another list of managers without clubs, which is 17 or 18, right? So the candidates are there, and so what they do with it is going to be interesting, because it's the Jesse Marsh thing. See, it's hard to trust anything you hear, right? Because in my opinion, the rumors you hear about managers are just as crazy as the friggin' transfer rumors you hear about players, right? Like they fly. I mean, in my whole life, I've never seen such thing as crazy as the stuff you hear about within the soccer, transfer window and that sort of thing. And you're hearing the same sorts of things, so you don't know what to believe. So there was a report, a month ago, that Jesse Marsh was close to doing that. It was rumored that he was waiting to get the last of his money from Leeds, and he was, being released sometime in August. And so that was inevitable to happen. Now you're reading something recently. Again, none of it's official. None of it's, none of this stuff is. Even the stuff that was posted by McIntyre.
Yeah.
There's no confirmed reports on that.
And there's not going to be. I think that's the other.
Right.
There's not. These aren't going to be like Doug is doing his best reporting, but none of these coaches are going to go, "Oh yeah, I interviewed for the U.S. job."
Right, and I will say the U.S. is pretty tight-lipped. It's very hard. I don't know where the leaks come from, but it's certainly not people direct in that area, because I'll tell you this much: it's very hard to get confirmation. I was trying to get confirmation on when the damn Gold Cup roster was going to be released, and I was told minutes before it was released that it was going to be released minutes later, right? So you can't get a lot out of them, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. I think they want to control that a little bit, but that being said, there's still leaks somewhere. Uniforms get leaked, certain other pieces of information get leaked along the way. So, but they're not confirming it, and that's that's the thing. And they've got to. I do understand why they need to protect it.
Well, that's just the latest in the U.S. coaching search drama. But I do think that it's reaching a point where we can confidently say that they have identified candidates, and I think that is a plus. Hopefully we identify some wins on the field this upcoming week. Game against Mexico on Thursday, June 15th, and on Sunday, June 18th, we'll figure out who we play. Thomas, any parting thoughts before we get off this call?
No, just anyone's listening that hasn't seen it. I know the Thursday match is on Paramount Plus, so I think, and then I forget where else, but that Paramount Plus is the English piece of it. So you have to get that.
Paramount Plus, yeah.
Yeah,
make sure you get that.
Well, yeah, I was a little surprised for some reason. I thought,
it'll also be on Univision on Univision,
right.
But that's obviously Spanish language. So,
right. So and they have great coverage on it, but don't expect to see on CBS Sports.
No,
I know in the past they've had they've affiliated there, but that's the only thing on that. But yeah, I'm excited for the match. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be intense, just like they all are for the fans. It is on later, so take your nap before.
Yeah, us East Coast guys, we're going to have to put another pot of coffee on later in the afternoon.
I know why you will. That's what I usually do, those 10 p.m. starts.
Yeah, and I have a adult league game at 8:55 is when it starts. So I'm going to be rushing from there to the bar to watch the game. I am assuming that it will be not starting at 10 p.m. Just a little heads up, because A, Concacaf, and B, there is a game beforehand. So, I know they schedule them with 2.5 hours in between, but if we'll see if that actually holds true. hopefully we're playing, 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night. That's the goal. Hopefully playing for a trophy on Sunday. Thomas, you can follow him on Twitter at USKeeper. You can follow me on Twitter at SoccerForUsPod. Make sure you subscribe to Soccer Down Here to get all of the coverage that comes your way from the SCH network. And if you're feeling generous, please support the show at buymeacoffee.com/SoccerForUsPod. For Thomas, for everyone listening, thank you very much. I'm Bart. I'm out.